My name's Chris York. I'm with Applications and Records, and I'm oversee the certificate program, and I'm also part of the title team, and we can argue about who supervises who, but we have a great team, and so I'll be representing us today. Just a quick overview of what we'll be covering. I'm going to talk about extension requests. We'll talk about proof of beneficial use, proof affidavits, certificates, and then as I mentioned, we'll talk about title. So a really wise man once said that all good presentations have a flow chart. So naturally, I stole a flow chart from him and put it in my presentation. But just to give you an idea of where we're at, and to zoom in on here, we're in the approving and proofing process. So this is kind of exciting because it's the tail end of your process with the Division of Water Rights, or could be. So, you have an approved application. In your order of the state engineer, there would have been approved due date. Commonly you see 5 years, depending on your application. Whether or not you're tracking that date, we are, and it goes in a tracker, and it lets us know when you're closing in on 60 days to that proof due. So we will actually send you a notice and say, hey, you have 60 days, and you need to decide where you're at in your application process. If you choose to ignore that 60-day proof due notice and do nothing, you're risking your application lapsing, and so we encourage you to take that notice seriously. There's kind of two avenues depending on where you're at, and I'll discuss each of those in greater detail. But so if you let that 60 days go by and do nothing, then your application will potentially permanently lapse. There is, as Clark mentioned, a process if it does lapse to go through a reinstatement, but let's just try and not get to that point. People often get confused. They say, well, I was using the water. Yet even if you're using the water, that application can still lapse. So one of the avenues, if you are planning to use the water still, but you're not quite ready, is you can go through what's called an extension request. We do have forms on our website, and there is a fee associated with this. I believe it's $50 filing fee. But in order to submit an extension request and get it granted, you must be diligently trying to use the water as it's proposed in that application. So let's just say you've been, spending the last 5 years in Aruba, and you want to submit an extension request, and you're telling us, oh, I've been in Aruba for 5 years, but maybe I'll come back to Utah and drill that well. That's not showing us diligence, but let's say you've built your home, drilled the well, and you're just finishing up some landscaping or making some final touches, but not quite ready to submit that proof yet. That would be more in line with showing diligence. So if you're requesting an extension request beyond 14 years from the original date, we will go through more we will scrutinize the application a little bit more, and there's also a greater fee associated with that because we will re-advertise when you're trying to extend past 14 years. We will review that application and make a recommendation. So. The other avenue is, okay, I received that 60-day proof due notice, but I'm actually using my water right as I requested in the application and as I was approved for. So I'm going to go ahead and submit proof of beneficial use. This is done on all types of applications, whether it's a change, application to appropriate, or an exchange. And this is most oftentimes done by a professional, and there's one caveat to that I will talk about in just a moment. But these professionals can be either a licensed land surveyor or a professional engineer. And the main reason we asked to do that, well, first and foremost, it adds kind of credibility to what's being put on the paper, giving the professionals basically giving their stamp of approval, if you will, saying that, yes, what's on this paper is how it's actually being used on the ground. We also asked for a surveyed location of that point of diversion and place of use, so we want to know exactly where this is taking place. And we asked for a measurement to be done showing the capability of that source, what kind of CFS or how many gallons per minute are coming from that source. Like most things in our office, we will review that and either accept it or reject it, and we will accept it, or if something needs to be completed, we will contact you and let you know it's not acceptably complete. So, as I mentioned, there's one caveat to whether a professional is needed, and this would be submitting a proof affidavit or affidavit of beneficial use. This is done on applications when you have a domestic use, so it's associated with a residence and a 1/4 acre of irrigation or less, 10 livestock or less, or any combination of the three. So you can't exceed 1 domestic, a 1/4 acre, or 10 livestock. This was made effective May 12th, 2009. There are some rules or some other information we're going to want if you're able to submit an affidavit of beneficial use. So we asked for a certificate of occupancy. If you can't get a certificate of occupancy, we can accept a tax notice showing that there is a home on that property. Obviously, we need the form. There's a form on our website for affidavit of beneficial use. And we also asked for a plat map and a map of beneficial use. And I'll show an example of that in just a moment. So again, this is an avenue to go through where an owner can submit their own proof and that you don't need the assistance of a professional. This is the form. It's pretty straightforward, kind of just basic information that we need to know what you're using, how you're using it, where you're using it, that sort of thing. It's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any trouble, if you're looking to submit one of these and you're having trouble, feel free to call us and we can help you through that process. As I mentioned, there is a map of beneficial use that is necessary, and this is kind of just an example of one that we drew up and that we would accept. There's a couple things that we're asking for. The requirements are written on the bottom of this map. If you don't have to scramble to figure out what you need, it's written on that form for you. But just as a general rule, we need to know where the home is, and we want to know, do you have a driveway, a patio, sidewalks, anything that would be non-irrigated area. Basic map elements like a north arrow. We want you to draw out the irrigated acreage, where any gardens or planter boxes, trees, anything you're irrigating. Where your livestock is occurring. So do you have a corral and a trough in the corner of your yard? That's where the livestock are watering. Show us the total irrigated acreage. And then just some basic information like the name of the applicant, parcel ID or tax ID number, and then the water right number. Sometimes we get these maps that get separated from the application, and that way we can just link them back to each other. Yeah.
Once you draw the water trough, does that mean you can't move it?
No, you.
I mean, that's the scary thing about putting a map like that together.
Yeah.
Planter box, same story.
Yeah, you can move it around.
Repeat it, or I'll.
Once you draw the map like that, can you not move the water trough or the planter?
No, you can move it. It's not stuck in that location, and we're gonna come out and yell at you if you move it on the other side of your corral or something like that. Now, if you're gonna move it a mile or two down the road and a completely different parcel or something like that, you may need to go through the change application process. But we're not gonna, we're not gonna hold your feet to the fire if you move it, a reasonable distance. And
Could I interject here?
sure.
Particularly with these affidavits, we don't require proof by a professional. What you're really identifying is you're using the water on your lot, and the lot is the place of use, and that would remain the place of use on the certificate. So the water is used there, then you're just fine.
Okay. There's some common questions we see and maybe some concerns. Proof affidavits are treated just like proof of beneficial use, aside from the fact that it's not submitted by a professional. It goes through the same process that a regular proof submitted to our office goes through. You will, if it's submitted and acceptably complete, we will issue a certificate of beneficial use on that as well. Sometimes we get asked, you are more than welcome to hire a professional to help you through that process. If you so choose to, you just aren't required to. And again, these can be submitted on applications to appropriate changes or exchanges, so there's no limit on that. And same with proof, or proof affidavits. If the water right is based on shares of stock in an irrigation company, that company needs to sign that proof or that proof affidavit. So,
Quick question.
yeah.
What's the advantage of one over the other? I mean, why would you go to a professional when you can do it on your own? What's the advantage of the first proof of beneficial use versus an affidavit? How
So,
would they be different?
so the benefit is you don't have to pay a professional to submit it for you, but some people are just more comfortable, we see people that just didn't want to deal with it, and they hired somebody that had many years of experience submitting it, and they just wanted it done and done right, and you're welcome to do that. So just to give you an understanding of the review process that we go through, so you as the applicant will submit it, or the professional on your behalf. We'll do an initial just screening, our front office will go through the screening and make sure that, all signatures are there, all necessary information, it's acceptably complete. And then it'll go to a regional office staff member, and they'll do a thorough investigation. They'll do a field review and make sure that everything jives, everything looks good, checking the order of the state engineer, making sure the conditions are met, these sorts of things. And they will prepare what we call a rough draft certificate. And that will be sent to our applications and records section. And most likely I will then review that. We have some other folks, but it will come to us, and we will review that rough draft certificate along with the proof and the order, and make sure everything looks good. And then we will prepare a final certificate of beneficial use that will go to the state engineer for review and signature. This is kind of the front of a certificate of beneficial use, what it looks like, and the last page will have the state engineer's signature after he reviews it. You also, when you receive it, should review it and make sure that it looks good to you. If you see any issues, again, there is that reconsideration and appeal process that Clark talked about. And we encourage people to record it with the county recorder's office. It's not required anymore, but certainly do encourage people to do that. And basically now you have a certificate on a water right, and just use it. You have it approved. What you have it approved for, use it. And then if you need, things change, then you can go through the change application process, do whatever you need to do. But it's yours to beneficially use. So I am going to transition into titles, so if there's any questions relating to proofs and certificates, I can field those now. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on. Yes?
Why is the price different for an extension after 14 years or before 14 years?
Because it will go through advertising and these sorts of things. We will, it'll take more time to process.
The after 14 years?
Yes.
You don't
Yep.
have to advertise before 14 years?
Nope.
Extensions? Okay.
Chris, you might add, it's more than advertising. The purpose of advertising is to invite and make other people aware that you haven't completed the project yet, and they may protest it. And there may be some discussion about, there may even be a hearing
Yeah.
about what's going on, so.
Yeah, so it just is, it's going to be, as you would expect, it's going to take more man-hours here to process that application, so thus the increased price. All right, just one more thing to add. On May 8th at 9 a.m., we do have a proof training that will go in much greater detail than we did today. We're just, able to scratch the surface. So if you would like to know more and you're interested in knowing more about proofs and certificates, please feel free to attend that. It will be here, and it is free. So please join us if you so desire.
Couple questions for you. If a developer drills a well for a subdivision and each lot has its own water right, does each lot have to prove up within 5 years? Additionally, does the well have to have its own water right?
Okay, so can you just repeat the
read
first
that.
part of that?
I'll read it one
I
more
just
time.
wanna- Okay,
If a developer drills a well for a subdivision and each lot has its own water right, does each lot have to prove up within 5 years?
yes. The short answer is yes. And you said does for each water right, you will need to submit proof of beneficial use.
Additionally, does the well have to have its own water right?
It's, so there's a well for each home, is what you're trying to, is the question. One well for 5 homes. Okay. There'll likely, well, it just depends, but there'll likely be one water right. It just depends on the situation.
It
What
sounds
he's
like we
saying
should
is they already do have a water right for the well. Each of those lots has a water right to use that well. So it's covered in all of the applications, the
That's
well
what-
is. So
It
it
sounds
doesn't-
like the person who asked this question maybe ought to give you a call.
Yeah.
Yes. And we can talk about the specific situation, but
Right.
But it doesn't require a separate water right for the well. It already is included in each of those water rights.
Then someone else also said, what about prolonged non-use?
so there's a couple different things associated with that. We would encourage people before it goes through prolonged non-use to file a non-use application in preparation for any non-use periods. We will look at in the approval, so you wouldn't really deal with prolonged non-use, hopefully, in the proof process.
I think this came up from your previous slide. You
Okay.
skipped an item.
Oh, yeah. So the reason I bring this up is just if once you get a certificate of beneficial use, you're free to now use it. But if you anticipate, let's say, conditions are going to take you, out of, you're going to stop irrigating for, you don't know how long, just in preparation, that be aware that that there is that 7-year non-use period, and if you're going to potentially come across that issue, that you want to be forward-thinking and submit a non-use application or take the necessary precautions to protect your water right from forfeiture.
If you have a water right and you're not going to use it and you lease it,
do you have to report it to the state? How do you document it so that it's proven that it's being used?
Yeah, so we can cover this in non-use. I believe, is it Therese? Who's going to cover that? Mike Drake is going to, he'll cover these issues down the road. I think he's this afternoon after lunch. So we'll talk about these issues after lunch. All right, I'm going to do some more shameless advertising. Again, I am just going to kind of scratch the surface of water rights, conveyance of water rights, and water rights title. We do have another training, and that's August 15th. Again, 9 a.m. in this same room, and it will go into much greater detail. It is also free, so if you want to know more, please do attend that. And if you have specific cases, I'd ask you to hold those questions relating to maybe potential cases that you may have, and if you want to have a discussion, we can talk during lunch or at a break or whatever, or you can give me a call. So if there's one thing to take away from this second part, it's that water rights transfer by deed in substantially the same manner as in real estate. It's basically considered real property that's being transferred, so that's how it's treated. And a lot of people get confused by this and come up with some situations they didn't mean to get into, but appurtenant water rights do transfer silently with the land, with one caveat, and that's unless the water right is specifically reserved in that deed. So if nothing else that you take away from the next, 15 minutes or 20 minutes that we talk, remember this. And deeds conveying water rights must be recorded both in the county where the point of diversion occurs and where the place of use occurs. So you don't see this too often, but sometimes when you're straddling a county line, or maybe you divert from a river that's in this county and you divert it downstream and it ends up in Sanpete County, we need that recorded in both counties. These are just two different examples of deeds. The one on the left is a land deed. It gives a metes and bounds description. It's a special warranty deed. The one on the right is a water right deed. They just look a little bit different, but you may or may not have seen these. We don't care when you're transferring. It doesn't matter to us what kind of deed you use or what deed it is. It could be a special warranty deed, a warranty deed, doesn't matter. We will review it all the same.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So,
if I were selling my property and wanted to separate the water to sell to someone else for cabin use, let's say, is that?
Yes, that's possible. Then the mechanism to do that would be through a water deed. So it is possible. When I said one caveat, I guess there's two caveats. You can via a water deed sell off the water separately from the land, but that would need to, if it's it would need to take place before before you deed the land. That would need to take place. I said if there's two things you take away those first two items I discussed. This one is probably just as important or maybe more important, so maybe there's three things. People often get confused and think that we are the official record keeper. That honor actually belongs to the county recorder's office. So the official water record, the official records belong at the county recorders. We are only as good as the information that people submit to us. So I'm just going to tell you what what the county recorders keep track of and what the state engineer's office keep track of. And hopefully this will make sense to you, because a lot of people say, well, I recorded at the county recorders. Well, you still need to show us who the current owner is. So the county recorder will maintain all the deeds, which are the ones, that's what actually conveys a water right. They will have certificates. Now it is optional, so they won't have all certificates recorded there, but in many cases you will see a certificate recorded with the county recorders. They are now required to keep an index of water deeds. So I think there may be some counties that are maybe doing a little better than others, but that's a very useful tool now. And assignments are now recorded with the county recorders. An assignment is just basically the transfer of unapproved or unperfected water rights. And we don't see those nearly as often, so we won't get into too much detail on those. But the state engineer's office, obviously they keep track of water right applications, certificates, and to go along with that, we have use records and the owner of record. So we will know who appropriated the water and if that's changed hands, or who the owner of record is. But if it's changed hands and somebody submitted what we call a report of conveyance, we will have that documented with us. But if it's changed hands and nobody submitted anything with the state engineer's office, we may not know that. So I put this graphic out there to show that the official record keeper, the county recorder, and what's shown on the state engineer's records as far as ownership, there may be discrepancies between the two, and oftentimes there are a lot of discrepancies. And so hopefully this graphic will help convey that message. And again, the county recorder is the official record keeper. So if I can repeat that multiple times today, hopefully that'll help you realize. So how do you go about updating records with the Division of Water Rights as far as title is concerned? We go through the process. Oh, shoot. Okay. So we have what we call a report of conveyance, and this is a form. It's available on our website. It's kind of the mechanism we use to update ownership on our records, and it shows the all grantors and grantees. It's basically you guys showing us the chain of title from the owner of on our records to who currently owns the water rights. It's important to note that you can only the form is just that. It's a form. The actual conveyance documents are the deeds, and that's what needs to be attached with that ROC, or the report of conveyance, or you'll hear it referred to as a ROC. So the ROC or ROC, or report of conveyance, there must be deeds and all conveying documents attached to that. You submit one ROC for each water right being updated. People get confused on that and think that they will submit one ROC for their farm and it will update for all 15 water rights associated with that farm. So remember, one ROC for one water right. You may see that you may see a question on that. And basically, this is to show the division who the current owner is. You're telling us who owns that, because we are not monitoring all the deeds that are coming into all these county recorders. So you're telling us, you're bringing that information to us and telling us that. And the chain of title that you report to us must start with the owner that is the owner of record as shown on the state engineer's record. So that can be found on our website and in our scanned documents or in the paper files upstairs. So there's a couple people that you will need in order to assist you in updating title. So there's certain people that can help you do that. There's one caveat to that, and I will describe that in a minute, but in most cases, it will require the help of a professional, and this would be an attorney, an engineer, a licensed land surveyor, or a title agent producer.
Quick question. Who is the most qualified person to identify those discrepancies? Is there a professional people can hire to track all this info down and confirm the actual status of my water, land, etc.?
Hey, yes, there are. An attorney, a professional engineer, a licensed land surveyor, a title agent producer. And the reason, and kind of hopefully to help answer that question even further, the expectation is that they're doing a thorough title search and looking at the county recorders and making sure that water always went with that land and it hasn't been severed, these sorts of things. So it's kind of lending, giving credibility to what is being submitted to our office, so we're comfortable updating and showing that individual as the current owner. So I said there's one caveat, that is the owner does have the ability to submit the ROC and update title if the water right number is mentioned in all the deeds in that chain of title. And this doesn't mean, sometimes we see people that try and do it and the deed just says and all water rights or and water right. It needs to mention the water right by number, so 51-123 or so on and so forth, and it must do it throughout that chain. So I mentioned the report of conveyance, ROC or ROC. This is the front page, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just it kind of goes through the basic information, and you can pull most of that information directly from the deed. And there are two forms on our website, one for 100% and one for a portion. Kind of self-explanatory. If you're trying to update title on 100% of that water right, use the 100% form. If you're trying to update on a portion on 28% of it, use the portion form. This is the portion form, and basically the main difference is in the middle you'll see it's essentially the same, other than this kind of gives a breakdown of the uses. So you're telling us what portion you are trying to update on. If you are updating by appurtenance, which will require the assistance of a professional, we do require that a map must be submitted. And there are certain elements that we require on this map. First and foremost, we need to have a section corner identified, and we ask that the section, township, and range be identified on that map. We ask that you put the water right number for the same reason we put the water right number on the proof forms, or on the maps for the proofs. Again, sometimes these can get separated from the ROC, and it just helps us keep them together. We ask for a north arrow, a scale, that you identify the parcel that you're updating on. Don't try and make us guess, because we won't. The acreage associated with the parcel that you're trying to update on. And we ask for legends that describe what the lines, the dots, whatever you have on there actually mean. So this just really helps us kind of visualize what you're trying to tell us in that ROC. So we do have mapping standards on our database that you should refer to, or the professional should refer to. But as a general rule, I just say, if you don't look at those, just think, what would a professional map have, and what shows and really tells the full story. All right. We have what we call deeds. They're land and or addendums. Excuse me.
Quick question, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I've noticed you have, what does it mean you have, it says, like, has an owner listed, but it says interest 0%. Why would that owner still be listed with a 0% interest? Is that just a bookkeeping error? Does that mean something?
No, it has meaning. They can have 0% interest. So I guess one of the common times you'll see that, and you won't see it after it's done in the certificate process, but sometimes you'll see it when there's on a share statement, and I don't know if we want to really get into that too much because I don't know if anybody's covered share statements yet, but there are situations where you will see 0%, and it's not a bookkeeping error, or it's not an error. It's for we have we have special reasons why that will be. So. Oh, I'm already there. Okay, so there are. I'm just gonna, for one slide, I'm gonna read. I know that's a presentation no-no, but I wanna read this to you so you, and hopefully this will help sink in. I'll describe it further, but the state engineer shall consider a water rights addendum that is recorded and forwarded to the state engineer by a county recorder in accordance with section 57.3.109 as a submitted report of conveyance under subsection 3. So an addendum, basically, it was created in order to create a dialogue between a buyer and a seller to tell each other and to tell the Division of Water Rights what water rights are or are not being conveyed or sold. So we're hoping that it creates that dialogue and helps the buyer and seller understand what is going and what isn't, and hopefully eliminate any situations where a buyer or a seller accidentally sells off water they didn't mean to, or something like that. It's a great mechanism because, well, for multiple reasons, it creates that dialogue, but also there is no filing fee. With an ROC, there's a $40 filing fee. With an addendum, there is no filing fee, but you record it with the county recorders and they send it to us. It's not the individual or the professional do not send it to us. It's sent directly from the county recorders. It is simply an attachment to a deed, so the addendum itself does not convey the water right. Again, the deed is what does that. It's simply an attachment to that deed. There are some requirements. All grantors and grantees must sign. The grantee must have an address on there, and should keep that address current with the Division of Water Rights. And also, it must start, just like an ROC, it must start with the owner of record as on the state engineer's records, what's in our file or on our database and scanned documents. So basically, an addendum acts as an ROC, hopefully creates a dialogue between buyer and seller up front as to what water is being conveyed. It's submitted and recorded with the county recorders. They send to us. We treat it as if it's an ROC. If it meets these conditions, everybody's signed. It starts with the owner of record, and there's a current address. We will update it as if it is an ROC. If not, we will send it back and give a reason why we're sending it back, and at that point, you would need to go through the report of conveyance process in order to update with our office. So just kind of a brief
Before you
overview.
go on, Chris,
Oh, yes.
can I just give a little bigger plug than you've given?
Sure.
These addendums were created on purpose to try to get rid of the obscurity that happens by silent transfers. And so the best thing you can do is to use a deed addendum to identify exactly what you intended between the buyer and seller. It gets recorded. It automatically gets sent to our office, so we know what's happened. We don't find out 20 years later that the land's been transferred and have to go through the ROC process. It's a great tool, and people ought to be aware of that.
Yeah. And it is mutually beneficial because of what Boyd just said. First of all, it gets you talking up front about what's being conveyed. There's no filing fee, which is great, and it does come directly from the county recorders to us. So, yes, thank you.
That's for any addendum that mentions water, period, that the county has to send it to you?
So,
That's for any addendum that's submitted to the county that mentions water or a water right, that automatically gets sent to you?
yeah, so you'll find the addendum forms on our website. So if somebody comes in with that and there's been that dialogue and there's a deed that's transferring a water right, and you fill out the addendum, and with that deed, you record it at the county recorders, and that will come to our office, yes. If there's an addendum attached to the deed, it will come to us.
It's your addendum.
Yes. Yes, and those forms are found on our website under the forms section. Okay, so
Just one question, just to clarify then, on the transfer of title, when we need to go back and on that chain of title, you say that we just need to go back as far as what you show on your record, so we don't need to go back further than that?
Correct.
Just starting from that point going forward?
right, that is correct.
Okay.
All right, so these are the major takeaways. So oftentimes, an ROC will require the assistance of a professional. We do have a list of professionals on our website that have done these in the past, and they've requested to be on this list, so you can refer to our website if you're in need of somebody. Transfers by appurtenance do require a map and the assistance of a professional. The simple transfers, as we call them, can be done by the owner if the deeds mention the water right throughout the chain of title. And again, this is important to note that ROCs, they're basically, they're not a decision document. We're just updating based on what we have been shown by you guys as who the current owner is. We're not declaring anything. That's not done with us. We're just simply updating our records.
Question. If the deed is quiet about the water rights, but there is a right being beneficially used on the property being conveyed, the water right automatically transfers with the land to the new landowner? Question.
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, so that's why it's important, and that's why, as Boyd mentioned, that's why these addendums are so useful, and we hope that people understand and will do their due diligence when they're buying and selling property. That's important.
As a clarification, Chris, that's fortunate or unfortunate. The system's actually designed that way on purpose so that if you conveyed land, the water right goes with it.
Yes.
The unfortunate part is if that's not what you intended, that's what you did by not saying anything.
Right.
So,
Which I'm assuming in that example, the intent was not there, or the intent was to maintain rights to that water, but. All right, and competing ROCs are considered a title controversy, and we will flag that, and that's something that the state engineer's office doesn't resolve. That needs to be done by those parties and or through the courts. That's something we do not resolve. So, and as kind of we just covered there, it's up to the buyers and sellers to be talking about this. Make sure you're doing your due diligence when you're researching and looking to sell your land or buy property. Make sure you understand what you're doing when you're conveying this, and just I really encourage you to, if you need to, get professional help or really make sure you're doing thorough research when you're buying and selling property and/or water rights. So, does anybody have any final questions I can answer? Okay.
Where was it at?
So the addendum process is in lieu of doing a record of conveyance. If I sell property to my neighbor, it has a water right on it, we write an addendum, file it with the county, then I don't have to submit the record of conveyance,
The report of conveyance,
report of
that's
conveyance with the state.
an addendum acts as a report of conveyance.
Okay, great.
Thank you.